I acted like a poor and naive mother when I met my daughter-in-law's family. It turned out that their wealth was built on my old company. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. I was deadheading roses on my front porch when the phone rang. My fingers were stained green from the stems, and the afternoon sun painted everything gold the way it does in Charleston when summer refuses to let go. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But something instinct, maybe, or just a mother's perpetual readiness, made me wipe my hands on my gardening apron and pick up. "Mom?" James's voice came through bright and nervous, the way it used to sound when he was 12 and had broken something expensive. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I smiled at the hydrangeas nodding in the breeze. My son was 37 years old, a grown man with a law degree and a mortgage, and he still worried about interrupting my afternoon. "Never a bad time for you, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" There was a pause. I heard him take a breath, the kind you take before diving into cold water. "I want you to meet Camille's parents. They're flying in from Boston next Saturday. We're having dinner at the Azure House, you know, that place on Battery Street. It's kind of formal, so maybe wear something nice? They're very traditional people, Mom. Very proper." I kept my voice light, but something tightened in my chest. "Traditional. I see. Yeah, they're old Charleston money, you know. The Lawrences. Richard and Eleanor Lawrence. They've been in shipping and real estate for generations. Camille says her mother is particular about first impressions." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I just want everything to go smoothly. You understand?" I understood more than he knew. "Of course, dear. I'll be there." "What time?" 7 o'clock. "And Mom?" His voice dropped, almost apologetic. "Just be yourself. But maybe the dressed-up version of yourself?" After we hung up, I sat in the wicker chair Thomas had bought me 30 years ago and watched the light change over my small garden. The roses I'd been tending were heirloom varieties, patient, hardy things that bloomed year after year without demanding attention. I'd always loved that about them. Be yourself, but maybe the dressed-up version. The words sat in my chest like a stone. My name is Alicia Mae Jackson. I'm 68 years old, and my only son has no idea who I really am. To James, I've always been the quiet widow who lives in the old bungalow on Jasmine Street, the woman who volunteers at the public library on Tuesdays, who bakes too much banana bread, who drives a 15-year-old Camry with a dent in the passenger door. When he was growing up, I left for work before dawn and came home after dinner. Always tired, always practical. I cooked with whatever was on sale. I mended his clothes instead of buying new ones. I saved every penny, skipped vacations, and kept our lives small and manageable. He thinks I worked as an office manager, maybe a secretary, someone ordinary, someone forgettable. I never corrected him. What I never told James, what I've never told anyone since Thomas died, is that I didn't just work in an office, I built one. For 23 years, I was the CEO and co-founder of Ford Atlantic Logistics, one of the largest freight and shipping coordination companies on the Eastern Seaboard. We started with a single warehouse and 2 trucks. By the time I sold it to a private equity firm in 2011, we had contracts with half the major ports from Miami to Halifax. The sale netted me $48 million. I invested wisely. The fortune grew. Today, through blind trusts and shell companies my lawyer set up, I own commercial real estate across 3 states, a minority stake in a hotel chain, and enough municipal bonds to fund a small university. My monthly passive income is more than most people earn in a year. But I still buy my dresses at discount stores. I still use coupons. I still live in the same 1,400 square foot house where James learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Why? Because Thomas and I learned early that wealth doesn't make you wise, it just makes you visible. And visibility attracts the wrong kind of attention. We wanted our son to grow up normal, to understand the value of work, to measure people by their character instead of their bank accounts. So we lived quietly, modestly, invisibly. Thomas used to say, "The loudest voices in the room are usually the emptiest." He was right. He was right about most things. When he died of a heart attack 3 years ago, I thought about telling James the truth. I almost did it at the funeral, standing beside the grave while the September wind pulled at my black dress. But then I saw the way he looked at me with pity, with worry, with that protective tenderness sons develop when they realize their mothers are mortal. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said, squeezing my hand. "I'll take care of you now." And I realized he needed to feel needed. He needed to believe I was dependent, manageable, safe. So I let him believe it. I let him think I was struggling on a modest pension, that I clipped coupons because I had to, that I was just another elderly widow fading quietly into Charleston's oak-shaded streets. I told myself it was kindness. But sitting there on my porch, staring at my phone, I wondered if it had been a mistake. Camille's parents are very traditional, very proper. I knew that tone. I'd heard it 1,000 times in boardrooms and country clubs, that careful language people use when they mean times wealthy times but don't want to say it out loud. The Lawrences were old money, the kind of family that measures worth in surnames and property deeds, that treats anyone outside their circle like a problem to be managed or a servant to be tolerated. And James wanted me to make a good impression. He wanted me to fit in. I rose slowly and walked into my house. The living room was exactly as it had been when Thomas was alive. Floral couch, doily-covered side tables, a bookshelf full of mystery novels and gardening guides. The only expensive thing in the room was hidden. A small Winslow Homer seascape hanging above the mantel, worth $250,000, that everyone assumed was a reproduction. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and opened the closet. On the left side hung my real wardrobe, the clothes I wore to charity galas and foundation board meetings under my legal name, A. M. Whitlock. Silk blouses, tailored pantsuits, a black cocktail dress that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. On the right side hung my everyday clothes, faded cotton dresses, cardigans with pilled elbows, sensible shoes. I stood there for a long moment, fingertips brushing both worlds. Then I made a decision. If James wanted me to meet the Lawrences, I'd meet them. But not as the woman I'd hidden for so long, and not as the woman they expected. I would go as exactly who they assumed I was. Poor, simple, naive, a widow barely scraping by, grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance they might toss her way. I wanted to see it for myself, how they treated someone they thought had nothing. I wanted to watch their faces, hear their words, feel the weight of their condescension. Because I'd learned over 6 decades that people reveal their true nature when they think there's no cost to being cruel. And if the Lawrences were the kind of people who judged worth by wealth, who sneered at those they perceived as beneath them, well, they were about to have dinner with a woman who owned the very ground their empire was built on. I pulled out my oldest floral dress, the one with the faded hem and the loose button. I found my scuffed leather purse, the one I'd carried to PTA meetings 20 years ago. I took off my watch, my earrings, everything that might hint at comfort. In the mirror, I looked like every invisible older woman you've ever passed on the street. Forgettable, harmless, poor, perfect. I walked back downstairs and stood at the window, watching the evening light fade over my quiet neighborhood. Somewhere in Boston, the Lawrences were probably packing their designer luggage, booking first-class tickets, preparing to descend on Charleston like visiting royalty. Let them come. I smiled, a small, private smile that Thomas would have recognized. They think they're meeting a poor widow, I whispered to the empty room. They have no idea what's coming. Outside, the roses continued their patient blooming, beautiful and unnoticed, exactly the way I'd taught them. Exactly the way I'd lived my entire life. Until now. The week slid by like a slow tide, each sunrise pulling me closer to Saturday. I kept to my ordinary rhythm library on Tuesday, garden at dawn, soup simmering by dusk, yet every chore felt rehearsed, every breath measured. I was tuning an instrument only I could hear. On Tuesday, I laid every dress across the bed like evidence. Left pile: silk, linen, midnight cashmere, the armor of A.M. Whitlock. Right pile: 3 faded cottons, one with a stubborn tea stain near the hem. I chose the blue floral, 15 years old, hem unraveling like a secret. I held it to the light and watched the sun shine straight through the thin places. Perfect, a dress that apologized for existing. Wednesday, I walked to the bank on King Street, not my private wealth branch, but the little neighborhood one with the cracked tile floor. I asked for $500 in 20s and 10s. The teller counted twice, puzzled. "Big weekend," she teased. "Something like that," I said, and tucked the envelope into the canvas tote I'd carried to James's kindergarten graduation. The bag sagged, the money gave it weight. I liked the balance. Thursday, I phoned the taxi company. "Pick up Saturday, 6:15 sharp, Jasmine Street to the Azure House." The dispatcher offered a client account. "No thank you, dear. One night only." I hung up, smiling. My charcoal Mercedes, washed, waxed, and silent, stayed under its cover in the garage. Let it sleep. Friday, I baked banana bread with the cheap vanilla, then threw it out. Tomorrow deserved the Madagascar kind, but tonight was still rehearsal. I needed to taste ordinary. Saturday arrived cloudless, the sky polished like the silver I never wore. At 4 o'clock, I showered without styling my hair, pinned it in a low bun that looked accidental. No powder, no lipstick, only the faintest rose salve, so my lips wouldn't crack when I smiled too long. I slipped on the blue dress, the scuffed brown shoes, the canvas tote, wedding band only. In the mirror, I saw a woman who could vanish in a grocery aisle. I paused at the mantel. Thomas grinned from the silver frame, dirt on his cheek, tomatoes in his basket. "You always said people reveal themselves when they think no one's watching," I whispered. His eyes twinkled back, as if to say, "Then give them a stage. Love." I set the frame down gently and stepped outside. The taxi rolled up at 6:15 exactly. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, leapt out to open the door. "Evening, ma'am. Special occasion?" "Family dinner," I said, settling into the cracked vinyl seat. He glanced at my dress, my shoes, my bag, and something tender crossed his face. "Well, you look real nice," he offered. I believed he meant it. We glided through Charleston as the gas lanterns flickered awake. Palmetto shadows stretched across cobblestones. Tourists leaned from carriage seats, hunting grandeur. My little neighborhood slipped behind us like a secret kept. The Azure House rose ahead, 3 stories of restored brick and wrought iron, windows glowing amber. Valets in white gloves darted between gleaming cars. Women in sequins laughed too loudly. Men checked watches that cost more than houses. I felt the familiar hush of money pretending to be casual. The taxi eased to the curb. I paid in 20s, added a 10 the driver tried to refuse. "For your daughter's books," I said, remembering the crayon drawing tape to his dash. He touched his cap, eyes shining. "Thank you, ma'am." I stepped onto the sidewalk. Heels clicked, diamonds flashed, perfume clouded the air. I inhaled it all, Yasmin, old wood, new money, and felt the old thrill, the moment before the curtain rises. A couple swept past me, the woman's gaze skating over my dress and away. I was furniture. I was air. I was exactly where I belonged. Inside, crystal chandeliers dripped light like molten gold. Waiters moved in silent choreography. A string quartet breathed Vivaldi into the corners. Every table gleamed with starched linen and heavy silver I had helped select 7 years ago when Marcus Chen begged my trust for seed money. He'd paid me back in gratitude and Christmas cards ever since. The hostess smiled, the professional smile reserved for reservations. Name? Jackson. Party of Ford. Her eyes flicked down, dress, shoes, bag, and softened a degree. Pity or politeness, hard to tell. Right this way. I followed, tote bumping my hip, heart steady as a metronome. James would be waiting. The Lawrences would be waiting. And I, poor, naive Alicia Jackson, was finally perfectly ready to be underestimated. Let the performance begin. James saw me first. He stood just inside the gilded doors, navy suit pressed to a knife edge, tie the color of money. The smile he aimed at me wobbled the instant my scuffed shoes crossed the marble threshold. Mom. One word, half relief, half apology. He kissed the air beside my cheek, cologne sharp, hug brief. His eyes traveled the length of the blue dress and snapped back to my face, pleading. You look nice. Nice. The word people use when the truth would be rude. Thank you, sweetheart. You look like a magazine. I patted his lapel the way I used to smooth his kindergarten collar. He flinched, then covered it with a grin. Camille materialized at his elbow, petite, blonde, pearls glowing against honey skin. Her gaze did the same lightning inventory. Dress, shoes, canvas tote. The smile she offered was warm, but her shoulders curved inward, as if my outfit might be contagious. Mrs. Jackson, I'm Camille. She extended a manicured hand. James has told me so much. Her grip was cool, quick, polite. I wondered which version of so much she'd been fed. Call me Alicia, sugar, and you're even prettier than the pictures. She blushed, genuine, I think, and stepped aside. Then the Lawrences arrived, parting the crowd the way royalty parts water. Eleanor first, silver bob sharp enough to slice bread, cream silk dress whispering with every step. Diamonds winked at her ears like tiny spotlights. She scanned the foyer, found Camille, and sailed forward. Richard followed, tall, tanned, Rolex flashing, smile already locked and loaded. Camille air-kissed both parents. James straightened another inch. Mother, Daddy, this is James's mother, Mrs. Jackson. Eleanor's eyes performed the surgical strike I'd been waiting for. Dress faded, shoes scuffed, bag canvas, hair bun held by a drugstore clip. Cataloged, dismissed, filed under harmless. Mrs. Jackson. She offered 2 fingers and a smile, thin as phyllo pastry. What a pleasure. James has told us so much about your charming life. The pause before charming was a lifetime. Please, call me Alicia. I took her cool fingers. And thank you for including me. I've never been anywhere so grand. Richard's handshake was firmer, meant to reassure me I was in safe, wealthy hands. Alicia, welcome to the Azure House. We like to think of it as Charleston's living room. He chuckled at his own joke. No one else did. The hostess led us through the dining room. Heads turned, not for me. I was the shadow behind the bright Lawrence flame. Crystal chimed. Jazz curled around us like expensive smoke. I felt every eye slide off me and stick to Eleanor's diamonds. Our table sat beside the harbor windows, candles flickering in silver hurricanes. James pulled out my chair. The legs scraped loud enough to earn a frown from Eleanor. I sat, tucked the tote beneath like a guilty secret, and folded my hands exactly the way my own mother taught me in 1965. Eleanor wasted no time. Alicia, James mentioned you're retired? She pronounced retired the way some people say unemployed. Yes, ma'am. 23 years in an office. Nothing exciting. I let my Carolina drawl stretch, soft and slow. Mostly answered phones and kept the coffee hot. Richard leaned in, benevolent. Must be quite the adjustment, living on a fixed income. Social Security stretch far these days? James's water glass froze halfway to his mouth. Oh, I manage, I said brightly. Coupons, you know, and the library's free. I beamed like I'd shared a clever life hack. Eleanor's smile could have frozen bourbon. How wonderfully quaint. There's such dignity in simplicity, isn't there? Cammy studied her napkin. Richard signaled the sommelier with 2 fingers. We'll start with the 96 Margaux. And waters all around. He glanced at me. Unless you'd prefer something else? Water's perfect, I said. Fancy wine gives me the hiccups. A ripple of laughter. Polite, pitying. Eleanor lifted her menu like a shield. Tell me about your family business, I asked, eyes wide. Camille says y'all have warehouses clear to Savannah. Must be exciting. Richard preened. Real estate development. Waterfront mostly. We partner with Ford Atlantic Logistics. Top-tier freight coordination. Keeps the ports humming. Ford Atlantic, I repeated, tasting the name. Sounds important. Oh, it is, Eleanor assured me. Only the best for Lawrence Holdings. James's knee bounced under the table. I folded my hands again, small and neat. Well, I surely do admire folks who build things. My Thomas, God rest him, always said a strong foundation is everything. Indeed, Eleanor murmured, already bored. The waiter arrived to take orders. I asked for the tomato bisque, voice soft, as if afraid to take up space. Eleanor's eyebrow arched. Soup? Richard ordered the tenderloin, rare, with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Conversation drifted to wedding venues, fall colors, the club's new chef. Every topic circled back to who belonged and who merely visited. I nodded in all the right places, laughed half a beat late, let my eyes widen at prices I could recite from memory. They relaxed. The harmless widow was no threat. The masks were perfect. Across the candles, Eleanor's diamonds flashed like warning lights. Richard's Rolex caught the light every time he reached for his scotch. Camille kept glancing at James, pleading with her eyes. Fix this. James wouldn't meet mine. I sipped my water and felt the old, steady, calm settle in my bones. The same calm that had closed 8-figure deals before breakfast. Inside my canvas tote, 5 crisp 20s and a matte black card weighted like sleeping panthers. Outside, the harbor lights shimmered, patient and ancient. They think they've met a woman who needs their approval. I folded my napkin, small, precise, invisible. They couldn't be more wrong. The first course arrived like a coronation. Eleanor's scallops perched on their plates in perfect spirals. Richard's oysters gleamed under a lace of mignonette. My tomato bisque sat humble in its white bowl, a single basil leaf floating like a surrender flag. Eleanor speared a scallop, dabbed her lips, then aimed her smile at me. Alicia, darling, I've been meaning to mention, the Charleston Cultural Society is starting its fall etiquette series, 6 Thursdays, nothing too strenuous. We teach posture, conversation flow, which fork for the fish. She paused, letting kindness drip. It's transformative for ladies who haven't had the advantage of exposure. The word ladies landed like a velvet glove across the face. James's fork froze. Camille's eyes widened. Pleading with the tablecloth, I set my spoon down with a porcelain click. 6 Thursdays, I echoed, wonder in my voice. My, that's generous. Do they teach how to smile when someone calls you quaint? Richard barked a laugh, mistaking it for gratitude. See, she's a natural. We'll have you sipping sherry with the DAR in no time. Eleanor's eyes glittered. Exactly. Charleston can be particular. One must know the steps. I lifted my water glass, letting the candlelight fracture inside it. My mama taught me one step. Never sit down to supper with folks who count your silver while you eat. Silence rippled outward. The quartet in the corner hit a soft chord and held it. Richard recovered first. Ha, country wisdom. Love it. He raised his scotch to James. Son, you married up. Nothing wrong with reaching for the next rung. James's jaw locked so tight I heard the click. Camille tried. Daddy, that's not— Relax, sweetheart, Richard boomed. It's a compliment. James started with modest stock. His gaze flicked to me, benevolent. But ambition lifts us all. I tasted my soup. Perfect, as always. Marcus Chen's kitchen never missed. Speaking of lifting, I said mildly, this wine is heavenly. That 96 Margaux, such a bold year. I read somewhere the entire vintage was bought by a single silent partner. I smiled at Eleanor. Imagine having that kind of taste. Eleanor preened. We do keep a few cases in the cellar at home. Richard winked. Only the best for Lawrence tables. The waiter glided in with the mains. My untouched bisque vanished. A small Caesar appeared in its place. House gift, no charge. Eleanor's eyes narrowed a fraction. Compliments of chef, the waiter murmured, bowing to me. Richard frowned. They know you here? Oh, I volunteer at the literacy fundraiser upstairs, I said. They're sweet to remember an old lady. Eleanor's fork resumed its precise dance. How civic-minded. Reputation is everything, isn't it? We've guarded the Lawrence name for 5 generations. One simply cannot be too careful. I buttered a corner of bread, slow, deliberate. Indeed, I said, soft as moss. It's the foundation everything else stands on. Richard grunted agreement. Eleanor nodded, satisfied I'd learned my place. They never heard the second meaning. Across the table, James stared at his salmon as if it might swim away. Camille's hand hovered near his, then retreated. I sipped my water and waited. The night was young, the masks were flawless, and the foundation, their foundation, was already beginning to shift beneath their feet. The entrees settled into their final act. The waiter had just whisked away Richard's empty oyster shells when the conversation turned, like a ship listing hard to starboard. Richard leaned back, Scotch glass cradled like a football. James, son, let's talk brass tacks. He flicked a glance at me, warm and paternal. Your mother's a proud woman. We see that. But pride doesn't pay the light bill. As you two start your life, we'd like to help. Eleanor jumped in, silk over steel. We've discussed it. A modest allowance, $500 a month, wired directly to Alicia. Covers, groceries, maybe a new dress now and then. She smiled at me the way one smiles at a rescue dog. So you never feel left behind. $500. I could buy their entire table setting for that and still have change for the valet. James's face went the color of the tablecloth. Dad, it's practical, Richard cut in, raising a palm. No son of mine should worry about his mother clipping coupons at 80. I'm 68, I thought, but let it pass. I set my fork down, folded my hands, and gave them the soft, grateful smile they expected. How thoughtful, I said, voice trembling just enough. You must be doing well with your contracts from Ford Atlantic Logistics. 5 words. Light as dandelion fluff. They detonated like a depth charge. Richard's glass stopped an inch from his lips. Eleanor's fork hovered, sea bass impaled. Camille's eyes darted to her father, then to me, then back again. Ford Atlantic Logistics. The name sat in the candlelight between us, glowing. Richard recovered first, chuckle forced. Sharp memory, Alicia. Yes, FAL moves 90% of our freight. Reliable outfit. How'd a retiree hear about them? I let my eyes go wide, innocent. Oh, the ladies at the library book club, they gossip about everything, said Lawrence Developments signed another big extension last spring. I dabbed my lips. Must be nice, having partners who never let you down. Eleanor's smile had frozen solid. Indeed, she managed. Richard's tan had faded 2 shades. He set his scotch down with a clink that sounded to my ear like ice cracking. James looked from his father to me, confusion blooming. Mom? I reached for my water, fingers steady. Just making conversation, sweetheart. The quartet in the corner launched into a languid moon river. Under the table, Richard's phone buzzed. He ignored it. Another buzz. A third. He finally glanced at the screen, thumb hovering, then shoved it back in his pocket. Eleanor's voice floated across the table, thin now. "Tell me, Alicia, do you follow the shipping industry?" "Me? Goodness, no." I laughed, small and tinkling. "I just repeat what I hear, like a parrot in orthopedic shoes." Richard tried for hearty. "Well, parrots can be charming." But the laughter never reached his eyes. I lifted my glass in a tiny toast. "To reliable partners," I said softly. 4 glasses rose. Only one held water. The power balance had shifted, quiet as a tide, strong as a riptide, and the Lawrences felt it slip through their manicured fingers. They just didn't know why. Yet, dessert arrived on a tide of silver domes. Creme brulee torched tableside, chocolate soufflé rising like a dare. I had ordered nothing. A single, perfect lemon bar appeared before me anyway, dusted with sugar that caught the candlelight like snow. Marcus Chen himself carried the tray. He was slight, immaculate, eyes bright behind rimless glasses. When he saw me, his whole face opened. "Mrs. Jackson." He bowed, not the shallow nod he gave governors, but the real one, from the waist. What an honor. The Coastal Literacy Foundation sent another thank you your matching grant, put 30 more kids in summer reading camp. He set the lemon bar down as if it were the Hope Diamond. The table went still. Eleanor's spoon hovered mid-air. Richard's soufflé deflated with a sigh. Camille's mouth formed a small, perfect O. I touched Marcus's sleeve. "You spoil me, Marcus. Tell the children hello." He beamed, bowed again, and vanished. Richard found his voice first. "You fund the literacy program?" "Oh, just a little," I said, breaking the lemon bar in half. "Libraries raised me. Seemed only fair to raise a few more." Eleanor's smile looked painted on. "How? Civic?" James stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The waiter returned with the leather folder. Richard snapped it open, slid his platinum card inside with the flourish of a man who'd never been refused. The waiter swiped, frowned, swiped again. "I'm sorry, sir." Declined. Richard's tan went blotchy. "Run it again. System glitch." Third swipe. Same soft beep of doom. The waiter's eyes flicked to me. Apology. Question. I reached into the canvas tote, fingers calm. The matte black card slid out like a shadow. A. Jackson Holdings, Inc., embossed in whisper gray. I laid it on the tray. "Try this one, sweetheart." 1 swipe. Approved. The machine spat a receipt long enough to wrap a gift. The waiter bowed, lower this time. "Always a pleasure, ma'am." Richard's card lay beside mine like a dead soldier. Eleanor's diamonds had lost their sparkle. Camille's hand found James's under the table. He didn't notice. I signed the slip with a fountain pen I'd carried since 1998. The ink was indigo, Thomas's favorite color. Richard tried for a laugh. "Well, must be a busy night for the bank." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Or perhaps a mistake." I folded the receipt, slipped it into my tote beside the 20s. "No mistake," I said gently. "Just Tuesday." The quartet struck a final, shimmering chord. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer dinged. The unraveling was complete, and every thread led straight to the woman they'd offered $500 to keep quiet. I dabbed my lips, set the napkin beside my plate, and waited for the curtain to fall. The night air hit like cool water after a fever. Gas lanterns hissed along Battery Street. The harbor breathed salt and secrets. Valets darted, engines purred, but our little knot of 5 stood frozen on the sidewalk, lit by the restaurant's golden spill. Eleanor recovered first, clutching her clutch like a life raft. She produced the smile she saved for losing bidders at charity auctions. "Well," she said, voice bright and brittle, "it's been lovely to see someone from modest roots carry herself with such grace. The word modest floated between us, wrapped in silk and venom. I turned. The lamps caught the silver in my hair, the calm in my eyes. For the first time all evening, Eleanor looked small. "Mrs. Lawrence," I said, soft enough that the valets couldn't hear, "you might want to look into the owner records for your company's warehouse land." Richard snorted, reflex. "Our land is Concord Street, the port-adjacent tract, and the new Mount Pleasant Distribution Center," I continued, as if reading a grocery list. "All leased from Atlantic Trust Holdings. My trust. You've been my tenants for 10 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Rent's always on time. Thank you." The harbor wind chose that moment to gust. Eleanor's perfect bob lifted like a startled cat. Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Atlantic Trust. That's registered to A.M. Whitlock," I supplied. "My legal name. The one on the contracts you sign every March." Camille made a sound, half gasp, half prayer. James stared at me as though the sidewalk had cracked open and shown him the ocean beneath. Eleanor's diamonds suddenly looked heavy. "You're saying we've been paying you?" "No, dear. You've been paying a blind trust that keeps my roses in fertilizer." I smiled Thomas's smile, quiet and absolute. "But yes, every dollar you bragged about tonight started its journey on my land, moved on my roots, and slept in my warehouses." Richard's phone buzzed again. He didn't answer. He couldn't. James found his voice. "Mom, why didn't you—" I touched his cheek, the way I did when he was 5 and afraid of thunder. "Because tonight wasn't about money, sweetheart. It was about mirrors." I stepped back. The canvas tote swung light against my hip, 5/20s, and a black card that could buy the block we stood on. "Good night, Eleanor, Richard, Camille." I nodded to each, polite as Sunday. "Drive safe." Eleanor reached out, one manicured hand trembling in midair. "Alicia, please." I was already walking. Scuffed shoes, faded dress, spine straight as a ship's mast. The valets parted without being asked. Behind me, pride collapsed in a rustle of silk and whispered panic. I didn't look back. The mask hadn't dropped. It had never existed. Truth had simply waited for the right breeze to blow it ashore. James's Audi idled at the curb like a guilty dog. He opened my door without a word, closed it soft as a confession, then circled to the driver's side. The engine purred. The city slid past in streaks of gold and indigo. We made it 4 blocks before he pulled over beneath a live oak dripping with resurrection fern. He killed the engine. Silence rushed in, thick as marsh mud. He gripped the wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white. "Why?" The word cracked open the night. "Why didn't you ever tell me who you really are?" I watched a carriage roll by, its lantern swaying. A tourist laughed. The sound floated away. I turned to him. Streetlight painted half his face in silver, the other half in shadow. "My boy. My beautiful, frightened boy." "Because I needed to know," I said, voice low. "If you'd stand up for me when you thought I had nothing." His breath hitched. "I sat there while they mocked you, while they offered you charity like a bone." Tears spilled, hot and sudden. "I should have stopped it. I should have." "You should have," I agreed, gentle as moonlight. "But shame is a poor teacher, James. Grace is better." He swiped at his cheeks with the heel of his hand. I was embarrassed. Of the dress, the soup, the taxi. I wanted them to like me, more than I wanted to protect you. I let the confession settle. No flinch, no comfort yet. Truth first. "You wanted to belong," I said. "I understand. I built an empire so you wouldn't have to scrape. But belonging bought with silence is just another cage." He turned to me, eyes raw. "Teach me how to get out." I reached across the console and laid my hand over his. Warm, trembling, alive. Start tonight, I said. Drive me home. Make me a cup of tea with the good vanilla. Sit at my kitchen table and ask every question you were too proud to ask before. Then tomorrow, you decide who you want to be when no one's watching. He nodded, small, fierce. I want to be the man Dad raised, the one who'd defend his mother in any room, any dress, any life. I squeezed once. Then you already are. He started the car. We rolled through the quiet streets, past mansions pretending to be humble, past gardens that bloomed for no one. My little bungalow appeared, porch light glowing like it had waited up. James cut the engine. For a moment we sat, mother and son, breathing the same salted air. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. The apology was small, perfect, complete. "Don't be," I said. "Just remember, our worth isn't measured by what we own, but by how we treat those who seem to own less." He leaned over and rested his forehead against mine, the way he did after nightmares when he was 4. "I'll remember," he said. "Every single day." I kissed his temple. "Good. Now come inside. The roses need admiring, and the kettle's lonely." We walked up the path together, 2 silhouettes under the same small light, the night folding gently behind us like a quilt. The lesson wasn't over, but the healing had begun. Tuesday brought a cream envelope, heavy as guilt. Eleanor's handwriting marched across the front in perfect Palmer loops. I carried it to the porch, slit it open with the pruning knife still warm from the roses. The words spilled out like expensive perfume. Deepest regret. Unforgivable assumptions. Hope for reconciliation. She signed it Eleanor Burke Lawrence, as though the full name might shield her. I read it twice, folded it once, tucked it into the drawer beside seed packets and Thomas's old glasses. No reply. Silence is its own scripture. That afternoon, I wired $3 million to the new fund. The Thomas A. Jackson Leadership Award, 5 full-ride scholarships each year for young women who code, weld, balance ledgers, or dream in blueprints. The first plaque would read, "For the girls who will build what we only dared to imagine. In memory of the man who taught me foundations are made of dirt and dignity." The press release went out under the trust's name. I stayed home, barefoot, deadheading the climbers. James arrived every Sunday now, Camille beside him, no longer afraid of the cracked stepping stones. They brought grocery bags and questions. Camille asked about cash flow forecasts. James wanted stories about the first warehouse cat. We drank sweet tea on the porch swing and let the truth settle between us like pollen, light, golden, impossible to brush away. One evening, Camille lingered after James carried the dishes inside. She traced a finger along the porch rail Thomas had painted seafoam green. "I used to think legacy was a name on a building," she said. "Now I think it's a table where anyone can sit." I handed her the pruning shears. "Clip the spent blooms, sugar. New ones only grow where the old ones let go." She snipped, tentative, then sure. Petals drifted to the floorboards like pink snow. Later, when the sky turned the color of Thomas's favorite shirt, I stood alone among the roses. The air smelled of salt and cuttings. A breeze lifted the hem of my old dress, the same one, now washed and sun-bleached softer. I whispered to the garden, to the dark, to the man who lived in both. They thought they were dining with a poor widow from Charleston, but what they never saw coming was that she owned the very table they ate on, the land beneath their feet, and the silence that taught them what true wealth means. The roses nodded, patient and unimpressed. They had always known. I gathered my tools, switched off the porch light, and stepped inside. The house was small, the rooms full of ordinary miracles. A kettle humming, a son's laughter echoing down the hall, 5 young women somewhere opening envelopes that would change their lives. Legacy, I thought, smells like turned earth and forgiveness. And it blooms whether anyone applauds or not. I closed the door. The lock clicked soft as a promise kept. Good night, Charleston. Good night, Thomas. The roses will be here in the morning, and so will I. Exactly where we belong. Thank you for watching to the very end. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because the next story isn't just intriguing, it's unforgettable. You'll be talking about it all week.